Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third day of IHA's Health Literacy Conference. We have a great panel today with some amazing speakers, so I just want to get some housekeeping out of the way, and then I'm going to turn it over to them. Just for today, so the virtual idea board is still up for you. So if anything pops up today as a great takeaway or a quote or something that you think was really inspiring, just drop your ideas down on that virtual idea board, and we'll review some of those comments on the closing session today. Let's jump right into some of those regular ones that housekeeping. So for questions on the virtual, there's that virtual help desk that you can visit. It's on the homepage for any questions that you have that come up during the conference. Continuing education, you can visit the CE information tab on the homepage. There you'll find provider specific information so that make sure you can successfully get your CEs. And that evaluations tab is where you're going to fill out all of your session evaluations and the overall evaluation for the conference. And so we really want to hear what you have to say and your thoughts. And we really look at those evaluations so we can start planning the next conference as well. For recording, so all the live recordings, all the sessions today will be recorded and made within 24 hours. And that is always our goal. I do want to give you a couple of updates. So for Tuesday, we've posted most of all the recordings. There's the Always Use Teach Back session. But unfortunately, we had a little bit of a technical glitch. And so we're working on that. And as soon as we get that one figured out and put together, we'll add that onto the website. And we'll make sure we email all participants to let you guys know that it's up on the conference website so you can see it. The other thing is that after the conference is over, on Friday or even next week or even a month from now, you can still visit the conference website and all the recordings will be there for you. In addition, so to yesterday on Wednesday, all the live stream sessions have been posted except for Karen Rivich. She requested that we didn't post her recording. The workshops is another one that we're working on for you. So as soon as we get those recordings edited, and we'll get those up so that you can watch them. So Wednesday's workshops, we'll hopefully have that to you by the end of today. So if you don't see a recording up, know that we are working on it, and we will get those up for you as soon as possible. All right, what else we got? So session information, so all of you will be muted per usual, but we do encourage your active participation. We love seeing all of your comments that you send into each other on the discussion tab. And we also encourage you to send in any questions you have to the speakers on that question tab. And don't forget about that vote up button where you can, if you see a question that you really enjoy or you feel like, wow, that's such a great question, hit that vote button and it'll give it points. And the more points a question has, the higher up in the queue the question will be, and the more likely that it'll get answered. I think that's all my housekeeping. We'll check my notes. Yep, that's everything I wanted to say. So for now, I want to turn it over to our moderator for the session. I'm going to tell you, I'm excited for our moderator. It's Dr. Rima Rudd. She's a senior lecturer on health literacy, education, and policy at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And she is one of the founders and leaders in health literacy studies, and a great friend of IHA and a great friend to me. And she is an inspiration to all of us. So I would like to introduce that our moderator for the session, Dr. Rima Rudd.
Well, thank you so much, Diana. I'm really delighted to greet everyone this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are. And especially that we have a wonderful panel focused on innovations. And as many of you know, an innovation arises out of absolutely wonderful creativity. Sometimes a spark, a light that comes, but sometimes out of some dreadful experience, something new develops and occurs to someone. It comes in many forms. As you know, it's an idea, it's a product, it's a process, it can be a program, and it's refreshingly new. Sometimes, quite frankly, it's not new to everyone, but if it's new to you, it's an innovation. And so today we have really wonderful panel before you who will share something new. For example, a virtual therapeutic help for caregivers offering assistance to those who are only accustomed to giving help rather than receiving help. A new kind of social media for healthful outcomes, tapping into influencers, for example. a new use and application for media arts that includes gaming for healthful outcomes. And so we have three panelists. I'll introduce each one at a time, and we'll keep our questions at the very end. We'll be accumulating them and we'll turn to them, and panelists can answer either as directed by your question or in general by a level of interest. So our first speaker today is Terry Ann Parnell, a friend and colleague with decades of experience in nursing administration, health communication, and leadership in health literacy. She's also the principal and founder of TAP Wellness and Health Literacy Partners. Dr. Parnell is an award-winning author and speaker on health literacy. I turn it over to Terry.
Well, thank you, Rima, for that introduction. And thank you to Michael and Diana and the entire IHA conference team for having me. I really do appreciate it. So today, you can go to the next slide, Diana, please. I just wanted to kind of, no, one back. I just wanted to set the stage here first so everyone has the perspective of where I'm presenting from and my lens. So my topic today is really about clinician burnout. And I'll be presenting from a healthcare professional perspective, you know, based on individual health and wellness. I'm sure everyone has read or heard on the news, you know, the pandemic has had far-reaching implications, you know, with burnout, not just for the clinicians themselves, but for the patients and for the organizations and across really the healthcare industry. I have, just to frame it a little bit, I have over 4 decades of experience in nursing. I've had many roles across my career, starting at the bedside, management, administrative roles, and leadership roles across a large integrated healthcare system. So I have that agility across many roles to really understand where our clinicians are coming from. Personally, I'll share that I'm also part of a family of many healthcare clinicians. We have nurses, NPs, and physicians. In my immediate family, I think we're up to 8 or so. So I also, while I'm not at the bedside at the moment, I am daily hearing and sharing. They're sharing stories with me of their experiences across many different roles. So I will be presenting an example of how I'm using technology really to provide personalized wellness support for healthcare professionals, how we can help them build community so that they can enhance resilience and really promote self-care, and do it, by the way, without any stigma attached to it. Next slide, please. So I was asked to respond to 3 questions. And the first question was really, what is the current norm? What's our baseline at the moment? And it's pretty staggering, the statistics. It's pretty dismal, unfortunately. 60 to 75% of clinicians are reporting terrible exhaustion, depression, difficulty with sleep, and really, I want to say also that the burnout they were experiencing burnout before the pandemic, and now the pandemic has just really accelerated that. Nurses in particular, over 75% of them have reported a worsening of their mental health and their physical health. They have a tremendous amount of anxiety on a regular basis, stress, often feeling depressed, and expressing PTSD type symptoms. Just a story that I was just spoke to a nurse 2 weeks ago who shared with me that she was looking for another position, which we're hearing a lot about. And during her interview, she shared with me that the interviewer asked her to share a profound experience during the pandemic that she felt her team, handled very well. And she started talking about this particular experience and shared with me that she felt her hands becoming clammy. She started getting sweaty. She felt her heart rate starting to increase. And she said to me, I almost felt like I was going to have a panic attack. And she was taken back by that because she felt like she was been handling this very well. And when she talked about it, though, she felt very differently. And I think that's the case. Many people are just kind of, burying their feelings and not discussing it. And when they do, it all comes flooding back. And it took her back. Next slide, please. It doesn't just impact the healthcare providers. We can't talk about the clinicians without talking about the organizations that they work for. The organizations, the burnout has a profound effect upon them. There's almost a 19% nursing turnover rate, which is costing millions of dollars per year. I believe it's approximately over $40,000 to onboard a new nurse, going through orientation, onboarding, and with benefits, et cetera. So with this high turnover rate, hospitals don't have the staff to take care of the patients, so they don't have the proper patient-nurse ratios. And what they're doing is they're hiring travel nurses, which travel nursing has been a wonderful career for many people. What's happening now, however, is that in order to fill these vacancies very quickly, they are paying travelers 2 to 3 times the salary of what the staff nurse that is working for the hospital is getting paid. So that is very demoralizing to the nurses that are hanging in there and working right alongside a travel nurse who's getting paid much more for doing the same thing. Some organizations are trying very hard to deal with this burnout and doing a pretty good job. Most are not. And nurses are sharing that they're so tired of hearing about, hearing that they're called healthcare heroes. They're not heroes. They're telling me they're humans. They have feelings. They're hurting. So they're tired of hearing and seeing healthcare hero posters, all over the hospital. And it's kind of like a joke within the nursing profession, but they seem to be getting an awful lot of pizza lunches, and administration's feeling like that is helping. May is Nurses Month, and many are sharing what the organizations are doing for nurses, and the pizza lunches just aren't cutting it. It's just not enough. Next slide. So the second question I was asked to address was, what's going to happen if we continue, down the same path? Well, we know that many nurses are already leaving the profession, and it's predicted that 75% of healthcare workers across the board will be leaving the profession by 2025. And I have to say, in my 40 years or so of nursing, this has never occurred. Nursing is a profession where it's almost, it's a little old fashioned, but it's like a mission. It's a calling. It's something that, healthcare, you go into it for a particular reason. And no one ever thought of leaving the profession until now. And in fact, we've just experienced in 2021 the largest drop in nurses in 4 decades. And in 2021, I think it was 100,000 nurses left the workforce. So if we continue down this, it's going to be, have a tremendous impact upon the healthcare industry. And we know that nurses are the backbone, of the healthcare system. Next slide, please. So what are some examples or, promising practices moving forward? Well, nurses have expressed that they really want work-life balance, and I hear a lot of that. I prefer to call it work-life harmony because to me, balance indicates like a push and a pull. And I feel that we should be living in a harmonious way, not necessarily with that push and pull. 26% of clinicians really value well-being, and that support would be a priority from their organization. Next slide. And we know, research has shown, which, is amazing to me, we have the research that supports that environments that are supportive of wellness, organizations that, focus on that, really have wonderful outcomes for the clinicians. Nurses report, overall better mental health, better physical health, less stress overall, really little to no burnout. Their diets are better. Their food choices are better. They're not, eating on the run. Their quality of sleep is better. And they just have less negative impacts from the pandemic on their lifestyle behaviors. Next slide. So what I have done is just very recently, I've launched TAP virtual wellness coaching. And what it is it's wellness coaching specifically from healthcare professionals to healthcare professionals. So it's only for healthcare professionals. I've been in those shoes through many other, catastrophes over the years, not as profound as COVID, but I understand what nurses do and healthcare professionals do each and every day, and the toll that it can take upon them. So this is a holistic approach to wellness that really focuses on their physical, mental, emotional, and importantly, their restorative health needs. So there's 5 pillars to TAP, and this is not a registered dietitian, program where you're getting a diet that provides you with meal plans and macros. This is about, work-life harmony. So it's move more, enjoying food, sleep soundly. And then we also incorporate throughout those pillars strategies to build resilience and practice self-care. Excuse me. Next slide. So it's really wellness coaching that understands the healthcare professionals. We have one-to-one coaching and we have small group coaching. We have live discussions throughout the 12-week program. Each person co-creates their personal goals based on the pillars. And in addition, we've developed a TAP app that's available to both the Apple Store and also the Google Android phones, where members will get daily inspirational and wellness messages delivered directly to their phone, kind of a nudge each day if they'd like. And they also can direct message me through the app, and really it's time for healthcare professionals to start caring for themselves the way they always care for everyone else. There's a QR code here if anyone is interested to scan it. They can just receive, really, it's just an email where they can receive updates from TAP if they're interested. Next slide. So we know that wellness programs are a smart strategy, not only for the clinicians, but also for the organizations. They improve productivity. They decrease absenteeism. Next slide. They improve recruitment and retention, so it would be tremendously helpful to organizations. Nurses have said that, the more support that they get from organizations and the more focus on workforce health and well-being, when that's part of everything that they do, it helps improve their morale and it helps and drive employee engagement. I mean, so many times I've heard that, nurses felt that they were underpaid, but they stayed because they loved working with that team of clinicians, and they had, the morale, and they supported each other. And that's extremely important to the healthcare professionals. And that's why I'm doing this just for healthcare professionals, because it'll be like-minded people. Next slide. So what are some examples? Again, as far as the wellness programs, we know that wellness programs will foster community. It helps build stronger relationships with coworkers. The Gen Z and millennials have reported that they really consider the wellness programs to be extremely important when they're evaluating who they're going to work for. The wellness programs, it builds clinicians' physical and emotional reserves. It builds that sense of trust. It also improves engagement so that the clinicians really can understand their organization's mission, vision, and goals. So, I feel that organizations really can utilize TAP Wellness Coaching and focus on sustainable solutions really for the long game and really holistically heal the clinicians that are hurting. I say that, imagine a nurse or a physician or a healthcare clinician going and starting each day with like a positive mindset, feeling energized, having that energized spirit like they did years ago when they first started, and a rested body. And that's what I'm hoping to help do with this technology and with this new innovation. So next slide. So these are some sources if anyone's interested. And thank you very much. I think I'm just right on time. So thank you very much.
Rima, you're muted.
Sorry, I was talking without addressing the mute button. Thank you very much, Terry. I really encourage everyone to read everyone's bio online and to get more details from the reference listing that people will be offering. We turn now to Clancy Bateman. Clancy is a consultant with JSI and has been for more than a decade with experience in strategic communications, social marketing, digital and social media, graphic design, evaluation. She's the communication director for Reproductive Health National Training Center and has a great deal of experience in this area. I have to add that with a good deal of generosity and grace, Clancy stepped up to the podium with very short notice as her colleague Jessica Holly deals with COVID. I turn it over to you, Clancy, with a lot of appreciation.
Thank you, Rima, for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Rima said, my name is Clancy Bateman, and I'm a consultant and health communications specialist at JSI. And this morning, I'm going to talk about the power of micro-influencers in public health campaigns. Next slide, please. In case you are unfamiliar, JSI is a public health research and consulting organization working to improve health outcomes for all, both domestically and internationally. Our health communication team works with public health clients to develop behavior change campaigns, implement communication strategies, and evaluate their impact. We also work to build the capacity of public health professionals to implement social media strategies through technical assistance. Next slide. So in 2022, we are absolutely flooded with messages fighting for our time, attention, and our money. Unfortunately, public health campaigns have to compete with all of these other advertisements and messages that individuals receive on a daily basis, which can sometimes total up to 5,000 ads per day. Next slide. So how can we as health communicators and public health professionals cut through all of that noise to reach our audiences with important information about health topics? Next slide. So that's where influencers come in. You have probably heard the term influencer before. Influencer marketing is an approach used in traditional advertising, but it can also be an important tool for health communicators to use. So influencers are defined by their audiences and engagement. Their followers can range from about 1,000 to multiple millions, and they can be on any social media platform, but Instagram and TikTok are particularly popular right now. Brands often partner with influencers to sell their products. Ultimately, brands want to understand which influencers have authority among their audiences and for what topics. So you can think about the different types of influencers in multiple ways. Some of the most common methods are by number of followers, the types of content that they post, and by their level of influence or sphere of influence. Micro-influencers are one type of influencer with a smaller but still very engaged audience of anywhere from 1 to 10,000 followers, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. Influencer marketing is a powerful tool because it allows members of the intended audience to talk about the campaign or a health topic in their own voices. Influencer marketing can also increase campaign authenticity, and help you build trust with your audiences that you're trying to reach. It can also support public health messaging by modeling health behaviors for your audience. So for example, taking PrEP daily as the focus of the campaign that we'll talk about was potentially decreasing barriers or stigma. Engaging influencers in your public health campaigns might sound advanced or possibly intimidating, but during this presentation, my goal is really to share some of the strategies that can make this a doable and cost-effective component of a social marketing campaign. So today we're going to share a few examples from the HIV Chill Pill campaign, which are the images that I've been showing throughout. This campaign was created by Better World Advertising with two main goals. The first was increasing knowledge about and use of pre-exposure prophylaxis or PrEP for HIV prevention among people of color in Washington state. And the second was establishing PrEP as a viable, trusted HIV prevention method among these audiences. The campaign used a mix of traditional and digital channels to share HIV prevention messaging. In partnership with BWA, JSI managed all of the organic and paid social media content for the campaign, including our influencer strategy. We also conducted the campaign evaluation. So the content from micro-influencers supplemented our organic and paid social media content by reinforcing those campaign messages and imagery and adding some authentic voices to the mix. So now I'm going to walk you through some of our key learnings from our work with micro-influencers. So our first step was really to identify and recruit those micro-influencers. We worked with a few different community partners throughout the state of Washington to identify potential influencers. And we also conducted a Project Listen exercise to see who members of our audience were following or listening to online. If you are starting to develop a campaign, at this stage, you could also build questions about influencers and who members of your audience are following into your formative research efforts. We also spent time vetting potential influencers to understand the type of content that they posted and also be on the lookout for anything potentially problematic. So after identifying our campaign influencers, we developed a toolkit and a training to ensure that influencers felt comfortable with their role in the campaign and what we were asking them to do. We also wanted to make sure that the influencers understood the key talking points for the campaign. Ultimately, we really wanted them to draft messages in their own voices, but we also wanted to make sure that they knew what types of things they could say or shouldn't say in the campaign. We also provided examples and question prompts in the toolkit in case they needed some inspiration. After the training, we asked each influencer to sign an agreement with us, confirming their role in the campaign, including the time frame, the number of posts that were expected of them, as well as the compensation. Spending time training the influencers upfront really paid off during the campaign, but we also devoted time throughout the campaign to supporting the influencers, including providing feedback on their posts, offering to brainstorm with them about content that could be shared, and also just supporting them in responding to any comments or questions that they received on their posts. Another approach is to ask influencers to submit their content for approval ahead of time before they post it. Our influencers were very comfortable with the campaign and they really understood the key messaging. So we didn't really feel that that was necessary for this purpose. So while the influencer content in our campaign aligned with the campaign values, I just want to emphasize that it's important to work closely with your influencers and make sure to provide feedback as they create content. So it is absolutely critical to compensate influencers for their work, and there are many different compensation models that you can use. In this campaign in particular, we paid all of our influencers a flat rate of $200, which worked out to about $40 per post. Most of the micro-influencers had a similar number of followers, but if there was a lot of variety in follower count, you could also scale the compensation based on that follower count or potentially an engagement rate. If someone already has a large following and is doing influencer work already, they might have a standard rate that they would give you. So just like we did with the campaign's organic and paid content, we also tracked the reach and engagement of all of the posts posted by our influencers. Our 5 influencers shared 48 posts during the course of the campaign and reached over 8,000 of their followers. They also had really high levels of engagement compared to our traditional digital ads and our own organic social media posts. 2 of our influencers also provided live content for Instagram story takeovers during Pride events in Seattle and Spokane. This is one of the images of one of our influencers, Beyonce St. James, at the Spokane Pride event. Influencer content posted during those Pride events significantly boosted our follower count compared to some of our other social media posts. So to sum up, working with micro-influencers is a really powerful and cost-effective way to reach intended audiences with your public health messages. Engaging influencers can lend a lot of authenticity to your campaign by having people share health information in their own voices to an already engaged audience that really trusts them and they already have rapport with. Working with influencers can also be a budget-friendly option for public health communicators. So when we compare the cost per post for influencers to the cost of a paid social media ad, it was in line with what we expected to spend on those ads. Thank you so much for watching this presentation, and please feel free to reach out with any questions or comments. My contact info is there, my email and my Twitter handle, Clancy Pants. You can also visit JSI's portfolio of health communication projects at healthcommunication.jsi.com to see this campaign as well as a few other examples. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clancy. I'm accustomed to the old-fashioned social marketing or marketing campaigns where placement meant what shelf in the supermarket are you able to put your product? And you've really introduced something quite new and different. We turn now to Mariantina Gotis, who is a professor of practice at the University of Southern California. She is in the Interactive Media and Games Division of the School of Cinematic Arts. With a very broad background in art, design, and engineering, she found the USC Games for Health initiative and works to increase literacy and public awareness, improve assessment and treatment techniques. She was the inventor of the Brain Architect game, a think tank participant at the White House, and she brings new ideas to us today. So I turn it over to Mariantina. Welcome.
Thank you, Rima. I'd like to thank everyone and also thank you for honoring me with this invitation. I would like to talk to you today about the future of health information literacy as I'm experiencing it through the media arts landscape. Next slide, please. So as Rima mentioned, my formal training is in arts, design, engineering, and technology. I specialize in virtual reality, and for the last 18 years, I've been working in one of the largest and most highly rated programs in the United States at the USC School of Cinematic Arts. So I design games, but not only games. And today I would like to invite you to our online streaming games expo, which starts at 2 p.m. Pacific time, and it features more than 50 student games. It's a very happy day for us. Next slide, please. For the past 15 years, my research and creative practice have almost exclusively focused on the intersection of entertainment media, public health, and medicine. I founded and I direct the Creative Media and Behavioral Health Center. We design and evaluate interventions with a wide range of desired outcomes, from the educational to the therapeutic. We are technology agnostic, problem-focused, person-centered, and we steal and borrow methodologies and experts from every and any field necessary. Next slide, please. So finally, my view of the future is also informed by my experience of being a frequent flyer in healthcare. So I have a combination of unfortunate genetics and some other factors, and I have to manage several conditions, which I've done since childhood. In the 5th grade, I managed to save my own life by recognizing symptoms I was having in my very, very beloved 1975 edition of Disney Health. It was not the first time that I would have to diagnose myself, unfortunately, in healthcare system. But one thing was certain, Donald Duck was my trusted messenger for health information. And this is a lesson I've never forgotten. Next slide, please. Entertainment media is an art form, and it's evolved tremendously the past 20 years. So I feel extremely fortunate to be working at a cinematic arts school because we explore entertainment as an art form as well as a medium for education, science, and healthcare. Next slide, please. So the past 5 years, maybe a little bit more, there has been renewed interest in interdisciplinary work in health and technology and the arts as we rediscover once more that while science and medicine saves lives, the arts can help create a life worth living. So we rediscover that creativity, culture, and expression are vital to communication and learning. So a lot of these reports make the case with varying success and insight. They're great starting points, but they barely mention new media. So even though I'm a student of the past with great hunger, I have the privilege of living in the near future because I teach. And in that bubble with my students, we're always trying to look ahead. So I've learned more from my students than any education I could have gotten on my own. And it's only fitting that the future that I will paint for you today begins with their work. Next slide, please. So here's what our students have been working on for the past couple of years. Artificial intelligence literacy is a critical area for the present and future. So Garrett Flynn, neural engineering and media arts student, launched a startup company around browser-based platforms for developing brain-computer interfaces to bring the technology from labs into homes and deliver its promise to persons with disabilities. So this project began via community engagement events, neuroethics panels, speculative fiction demonstrations of technology, design fiction competitions, even high school classes in programming and neuroethics. He built a very large community to contribute to his project. Next slide, please. So with students or recent graduates, I should say, Laura Chechanowicz, who's an animator and design researcher, Liz Hogginson, an animator and educator, Julie Lutz, artist and occupational therapist. We developed a world-building platform for envisioning the future of rehabilitation through a critical utopian lens. We interviewed experts in community, conducted creative writing workshops, and collected stories about an imagined future. So this was work done during the pandemic, at a time where our entire research practice in virtual reality and cognitive motor rehabilitation was shut down while we looked for safe ways to continue our work. Design fiction and foresight literacy are areas that can really intersect with health literacy in very exciting ways. Next slide, please. Jeff Newell, clinical psychologist, for his dissertation study on mindful gaming, replicated a classic experiment on mindfulness to learn whether we could teach college students elements of mindfulness while doing an activity they already enjoy. So only novices to mindfulness were recruited for the study, which made it an excellent test to see whether a simple induction could be used alongside a well-written script and a pleasurable self-selected activity. So pleasure was measured via self-determination theory. These are questionnaires that are task agnostic. They're quite easy to score and interpret. And I believe that understanding what entertainment efficacy is as a construct and how to measure it is the future evaluation in many health literacy efforts. Next slide, please. So in our program, we like to say that games are the literature of the present and future, and their genres and content vary as much as traditional literature. So over the past decade, we've seen student interest in mental health, for example, skyrocket. So 2 research projects I'm going to mention focus on compassion and self-care. Alma by Frenchy Palamara, a very straightforward interactive narrative game about compassion and self-compassion in the daily life of a pediatric nurse. And next slide, please. Hedgehog Hug by Claire Hu is a game about social anxiety and self-care behaviors. So I believe this level of nuanced storytelling and modeling of complexity in games, combined with good accessibility, can really promote storytelling across many different audiences, not just gamers. Next slide, please. Last but not least, the future has to be more diverse and inclusive. So current avatar and character creators perpetuate many stereotypes of different identities and gender, body type, race, etc., in very harmful ways. Given the research on avatar identification in virtual worlds over the past 30 years, designers themselves need literacies on inclusive practices that can elevate marginalized voices and affirm diverse users and players. So I'm showing here the work of Michelle Ma, a technical artist who's very passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion practices in the game industry. She developed an inclusive avatar creator concept using participatory research and co-design at a very timely moment where talks about the metaverse are really exploding. Next slide, please. So on the faculty-led research, I will showcase only 2 examples. First, our most successful project, the Brain Architecture game, a tabletop game about the science of early childhood and its role in lifelong resilience. So this is a collaboration that started in 2009 with the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, the Frameworks Institute, and the University of Pittsburgh. It's a game that's been translated into several languages, played by thousands of people worldwide in very different settings: education, healthcare, government, business, NGOs, libraries. We've seen it all over the place, all over the world. The game has been tremendously rewarding collaboration across all these different sectors and many, many disciplines. It really speaks to the power of the medium and to having also the right ingredients across the team. That kind of thing is hard to replicate. We can't take that for granted. And also, for my team at USC, it was a great gift to us that the core story we had to work with had been already created and tested by an existing collaboration by the previous partners, the other institutions I mentioned, over an entire decade. So framing, and a very necessary skill for effective health communication and advocacy, really helped us with this project. So the proliferation of the phrases toxic stress and brain architecture, which has been now making its way in popular science and press, is the outcome of 25 years of steadfast work between scientists and health communicators to crack the code on how to teach what matters about the neurobiology of childhood adversity. It's really quite hard to find the right metaphors for this. Next slide, please. A second example of innovation I want to showcase is using cinematic-based media and methods inspired by narrative medicine to develop brief interventions that can teach important things about lived experience relative to some health context. So while we see the power of media through the aesthetic impact they can provide, their true power lies in instigating a conversation that can be transformative. So very often, for teaching and other reasons, I create interactive experiences after screening media that have to go beyond discussion. So I often do it because I want to avoid being the central figure in a discussion. And I really want to find ways to bring everyone's voice into the conversation. So it's a type of engagement exercise. So we follow up screenings with structured and timed reflective and creative writing. And then we share the writing. And this whole process feels very playful and participatory, but it's also contained. So despite having its origins in a more academic pedagogical approach, such as narrative medicine, my experience with this and an evaluation method I've developed for it leads me to believe that it is the future of sparking conversations about different types of health literacies. And it certainly is the future of transprofessional team building. Next slide, please. So perhaps the most crucial future for health literacy, especially as it intersects more with media and technology, is becoming more transdisciplinary and transprofessional wherever we're not already there. So my favorite reference on transdisciplinarity comes from Patricia Rosenfeld, At the time she wrote this, she was a Carnegie Foundation program officer looking to break new ground in tropical disease transmission. So she incentivized doctors and social scientists to work together more than 30 years ago when it was not the norm, certainly not around this topic. Transdisciplinarity is the most challenging type of collaboration, but there's really no other way to solve problems that are complex and new. And being transdisciplinary means that we work together from start to finish, from design to evaluation to sharing our results, and then go back to our respective disciplines and transform them. So for lasting impact, there also has to be intergenerational transmission of a conceptual framework and method. We have to be able to teach what we learned. Next slide, please. So this way of working can be exhausting and sometimes has few tangible incentives. And it's often labeled bravery, which is a code for foolish, code word. But it can promote personal and team resilience, and it can offer intellectual and spiritual renewal. Above all, I think it can renew faith and hope in process and change, which is always needed. So note Dr. Rosenfield's nod to health inequities written in 1992, but still very timely. So there's always a historic moment to be seized. So even though the pandemic has definitely aged us and worn us out in body and spirit, it has forced us to become innovative with fewer resources and to look at what's essential. Next slide, please. So for the past 2 years, we continue to weave the thread of past to present to hold ourselves together. But it's time to look also to the future with hope and renewed energy. So I therefore declare the future of health literacy to be cinematic, to be interactive, to be participatory, and more inclusive, not just of age, gender, race, ethnicity, disability, socioeconomic status, but also of other disciplines. The more, the merrier. And my email is included here in this last slide. I thank you very, very much.
Oh, thank you, Maria Dina, for a superb presentation. And I hope everyone joins me in thanking all three of our panelists for terrific inspiration. We've learned that what works with patients works with professionals, that what engages gamers can engage us all, that placement and trusted sources are extraordinarily important, whether it be Donald Duck or it be the person online who gathers a number of followers because of style, can be the voice that brings health to people. This was just superb. I've learned so much, and I think I want to follow up with each of you, and I hope everyone else does as well. We have a long list of questions, and I will note them right now. The first one, actually the first two, go back to Terry Ann Parnell, and Tiffany Chavez asked, she's very curious about comparing the nations that have universal health care with the US. And do nurses leave or stay in different rates?
Oh, thank you. You know, I don't know the specific data regarding universal health care, but I can say that this is a global health crisis. You know, the fact that nurses are leaving the profession. I think it was in January of 22 of this year that the International Council of Nurses, which is a global organization, shared that the world will be short, I believe, 13 million nurses by 2030. I believe that's accurate. So it is a worldwide concern. And the nurses that are leaving, I will clarify that it's mostly hospital-based nurses across the country. And if they are leaving, many are leaving to more ambulatory type settings. They're either leaving the profession or they're moving to settings outside of the hospital. They're doing outpatient nursing, maybe informatics, working with technology, medical writers, going into health policy. There's so many. The skill set of a nurse is very varied, and those skills can be applied to many other things. So it's extremely varied as to where they're going. Camp nursing, school nursing, the list is pretty exhaustive.
And one more question for you, Terry. And this is from Andrea Ferguson. What does it mean for an institution to be supportive of wellness?
That's a great question. So many organizations feel that they are supportive of wellness because maybe they will have in the cafeteria meatless Mondays or a walking Wednesday where they try to get their employees to all gather. But when organizations are supportive of wellness, it's really integrated throughout everything that's being done. And it's also the nurses and the physicians' wellness outside of when they work. So it's really a holistic approach to wellness, that they care about their employees even when they're not at work. So offering those programs that can do that so that they feel supported and they feel trust and boost their morale. So it's not just these little, flavor of the month, so to speak, that they tend to call little events that are done around wellness, but it's really something that's part of the culture of the organization. So I hope that helped.
Yes, thank you. Clancy, Sarah Bowen wanted to ask, are there any drawbacks to working with micro-influencers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ultimately, you are leaving your campaign in the hands of someone else, which I understand can be potentially scary. But that authenticity is really the point of working with micro-influencers. So you want someone to take your key campaign messages and really reinterpret them, put their own spin on them in their voice, rather than regurgitating the talking points. So that was a big part of why we invested so much time into both vetting our potential influencers before we engaged with them, as well as training them before the campaign had launched and providing them with resources like that toolkit that had some prompts and content ideas, and also providing support throughout, whether it was hopping on a Zoom to brainstorm some ideas with them or sending some Instagram DMs back and forth about what they were about to post. So we really wanted to make sure that they felt supported. And that helped us ensure that the content they were posting about the campaign was both relevant and appropriate.
Thank you, Clancy. There was another question that related to what are your criteria when you're vetting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't go into too much detail on our vetting process, but we worked with community partners doing HIV prevention work in Washington State and really looked at who their followers were and who was engaging with their posts as a starting point. And then we also looked at key hashtags like HIV and PrEP to see who in Washington was posting about these topics, what they were saying, what sort of the conversation was, basically just taking a pulse of the conversation. We also asked our partners to post a recruitment flyer for that influencer search, and they also led us to a few key figures in their communities. But once we had our list of potential influencers, we really looked at the type of content that they posted, again, sort of the topics and the tones that they were taking about health, about HIV. A lot of them were posting about PrEP already. How many followers they had, their engagement with their followers, so the number of likes or comments that their posts were getting, as well as how frequently they posted. And then lastly, just location. We wanted to make sure that they were in Washington State, people of color, sort of in the intended audiences for the campaign we were putting out. And one thing I wanted to point out is just with micro influencers, the number of followers is not necessarily the most important factor in whether or not they'll have influence. So even if they only have, say, 800 followers or even less than that, they might have super high engagement rates with their audience, and that can generate a lot of conversation about the health topic at hand, whether that's for your campaign or something else that they're already talking about.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Maria Dina, people seem to be very eager for more details. I know that you started answering a couple of the questions already online, but I wonder if you can give us a little bit more detail about the narrative medicine solution.
Sure. This is something that I've used as a pedagogical approach in my classes and finally got to a place where I can do evaluation. So the evaluation happened in Greece, but we've been using this in our classrooms. So I used animation and documentary film usually, and also captured streamed games. So instead of playing the game in class, we select someone who has already played and recorded that. And those can be several hours long. So we fragmented usually by scene. So depending on the goals that you have, the intensity of the conversation, the type of audience you're working with, your context dictates the length. So I do micro sessions once a month with my lab where I curate an animation or something, a film that's short, that's no more than 10 minutes approximately in length, and then do a 45-minute structured writing and sharing exercise with people together, and that usually can get us through 3 to 4 prompts, and it's very powerful. And if it's repeated, people get into kind of a certain flow in terms of doing this. But even with just one time, it can be very powerful. Yesterday, I screened the 1-hour version of the documentary film Picture a Scientist and did about an hour and 15 worth of structured prompts. And it was a very, very wonderful discussion with psychology fellows at Children's Hospital. So it's a great team building exercise. It can communicate a lot of different types of literacies. It can achieve a lot of different goals. So the prompts that you write dictate what your outcomes will be.
Thank you. You shared your experience with Donald Duck. I wonder if you'd be willing to just give an example of a program that your team has developed, health related for young children.
There is a project that we did for 3 to 6 year olds to also answer. Someone was asking about young children. We've done for as young as 3 to 6, but also let's say 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. For the 3 to 6 year olds, it was stereoscopic, anaglyph stereoscopic game on a table where you had to wear the glasses that are paper for seeing content stereoscopically, for teaching how your eyes work. And then for children 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, we did a game that was to influence their eating preferences and just sort of shift their willingness to taste new things. And that was a gardening and cooking game. So these are, tailored, they're developmentally appropriate, and they're brief exposures. The one game was for installation at an epidemiological study clinic, which had potentially thousands of people to go through it. And the other one was tested in schools, and it was, it's hard to remember. I think 6 exposures, brief exposures, no more than 15 minutes. So the younger the children, the briefer the exposure to media. We're very sensitive about this. And we also don't use slot machine reward mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. We know from, those of us in academia, perhaps, have read Diffusion of Innovation. And we know that there's often a group of people who welcome innovations. There's also a large group of people who push back. And I wonder if any of you might share either where you've been exceedingly welcomed in regard to a health-related project, and where you might have had some pushback. No, we're not going to go there. We're not going to do that kind of thing. I wonder if you're open to sharing either such experience.
It's a tough one, Rima. I have to say that I don't find a lot of pushback. What I find is that there isn't a lot of media literacy about what you can do with people. So a lot of the conversation about games and media, especially for work with children, has been quite negative, and the research that has been done and it has focused a lot on negative effects. But what I've tried to do is show what's possible that is positive, and that usually reduces or makes the skepticism disappear about all these other things. So I don't find a lot of pushback on that front, because we like to show examples rather than just describe with words, because if you only describe with words, it people will, their biases will come through essentially. So I've been lucky to also work at a film school that somehow evokes awe when you talk to people, and they're very curious. And then we shift the conversation to what's possible in education and healthcare via the medium.
Lovely, lovely. Anyone else think of either a pushback experience or enthusiastic reading?
So Rima, I wouldn't say that it's exactly pushback, but it's a common misconception or theme in the healthcare industry that, that wellness is kind of the fluff, okay? That, it's not the organization's responsibility necessarily, that it's up to each individual to, figure out what they need to support their own wellness. And there's also another theme that is there's a tremendous amount of stigma around healthcare professionals who've been trained to care for people to now say, I need help. Okay, I'm struggling. So in an organization where there may be a chief wellness officer as a role, they think by having that role, kind of similar to back decades ago to health literacy, just because they have someone with the title in their organization, they feel that they're doing a wonderful job with wellness, or in the past with health literacy. And I think it really has to be, part of, as I said, the culture and sustainable, and not a flavor of the month. And it should be offered as part of the benefits package for employees if they would like to partake in this, and more preventative, just like most things that we do. So I think it's not necessarily pushback, but it's how it's viewed in the industry.
Oh, very good point. Clancy, I wonder if you've had any kind of pushback from funders who might see this as trivial or not trustworthy.
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily say pushback is what we've encountered, but I do think we have encountered some types of skepticism from our public health clients about the impact of working with micro influencers specifically. I think when we say influencers, public health clients automatically think of the ones with millions of followers that are going to be sort of well outside their public health department budgets, for example, and they either get intimidated or scared off by that prospect. And sort of talking about micro influencers, I think a lot of stock is put into the number of followers, and there's sort of a misconception that someone with a smaller following may not have as much impact or influence in their network of people. So that's why we put a lot of stock into that evaluation, to be able to demonstrate that the influencer posts are really making a difference in sort of the overall trajectory of the campaign, and really encouraging people to, public health clients, to leverage the voices of people in the communities that they are trying to reach.
Oh, good point. Good point.
Yeah.
Well, as we move into the future, each of you in your own realm, what's next in your area of work? What's the cutting edge? What do you see as coming along with what you're doing?
I'll take a first stab at this. I think in my area, what I see is enormous interest in mental health and health in general. So to connect it to your question before in terms of pushback, I would say the biggest pushback we had when we started 15 years ago, besides the sponsors, actually, who thought, you know, it was just too cutting edge to be deployed in public health. I think that a lot of students were, especially creatives, were worried about being in the space that was associated somehow with disease or illness. You know, there was not a lot of willingness to go in that. People wanted to be auteurs and make, you know, great storytelling pieces about other things that somehow were not connected with health, even though I find that impossible. Everything is connected to our health. And what has really changed is that we now have the capacity to write great stories, have high level of aesthetic quality, and also have high quality messaging and other aspects tested, and better evaluation methods for understanding the impact of our work. So I see the future as having improved methodology and improved entertainment efficacy to a level that wasn't really possible in the previous decades. There's more collaboration. People are a little more multidisciplinary within themselves, and that really, I think, helps quite a bit. It will help our field.
Very optimistic. Wonderful.
Rima, I could say that for me, the future, I'm hoping that nurses and healthcare professionals really become empowered to prioritize their self-care. And if the organizations are not providing it for them, for each person to value themselves enough to incorporate, you know, activities and strategies to care for themselves as they care for everyone else all the time. And, you know, really you can't pour from an empty cup, and that's what's happening. And really, you know, care for themselves. It's like putting on your oxygen mask first so that you can take care of everybody else. And historically, that's not how nurses and healthcare professionals often function. So I'm hopeful that in the future, that they'll be able to do that without any stigma, so that we continue to really empower the nursing profession, because it's not looking, you know, too positive.
Are the professional groups stepping up to the line as well, not just the institutions, to have that collectivity be supportive of the individuals?
They're all, you know, this month is Nurses Month, and actually, it's usually Nurses Week, which is the 6th to the 12th every year, which was Florence Nightingale's birthday. And this year they extended Nurses Week to Nurses Month. And they had a theme for each of the weeks. And they started the month off with self-care. That was the first week because of the need for that. I mean, everyone recognizes the need, but, you know, speaking about it and actually putting, you know, the finances behind it to really offer it to the staff, it makes sense all around for the staff and for the organizations. I don't think they're there yet, honestly, you know, where they're willing to, you know, put the money behind offering these programs for their staff, you know, but I'm hoping that we get there.
Wonderful. And Clancy, where are we going beyond influencers?
Yeah, I think for the public health world, I think that influencers and particularly micro-influencers are still a relatively new concept. I think we've seen overall a huge growth in influencer marketing sort of in the commercial sector over the past few years. And I think that's only going to continue to grow, both on Instagram, but also especially on TikTok, which is incredibly popular. And I'd love to see more public health departments sort of leveraging the power of influencers, particularly with video content on both TikTok and Instagram Reels. One encouraging example I've seen, there was an article in The Atlantic maybe a year and a half ago, sort of pre-COVID vaccines, talking about this opportunity to engage influencers in public health work. And we've actually seen that come to fruition during the campaign. A few of the influencers, popular influencers that I myself follow on Instagram, are now working with Walgreens to talk about the availability of COVID vaccines, as well as COVID testing and sort of their day-to-day behaviors and how they're protecting themselves from COVID. So I'd love to see more of that in the public sector, not just in the commercial sector moving forward.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. There are just a couple of more questions that have been listed. One, is the content creation methodology data-driven, such as patient surveys, demographics, etc.? The second, how invested are these micro-influencers in the campaign? And is there a relationship between health advisors and micro-influencers? And I wonder if you could tap into any of those.
Yeah, so the content creation, sorry, could you repeat the content creation question?
Yes, is your content creation methodology data-driven, such as through patient surveys or demographics, etc.? And that was brought by Amber Sharma question.
Yes, so that was very much data-driven. We really put a lot of emphasis on formative research before we go into any social marketing campaign, so that we are creating content that really resonates with our audiences. This project in particular was a partnership between Better World Advertising and JSI. So Better World Advertising conducted that formative research through focus groups, as well as working with some HIV prevention partners in Washington, but really to make sure that the key messages for the campaign and sort of the overall look and feel and the tagline was really hitting home with the folks that we were trying to reach throughout the state of Washington. And then we sort of took that research and formulated the key messages for our organic and paid social media as well, to make sure that we are really hitting the right notes and that people would want to engage with the campaign, including those influencers. And the influencers, I don't think would have engaged with us if they didn't feel like the campaign was the right fit. We did a lot of outreach to potential influencers, and people were pretty upfront with us that they felt like it wasn't the right fit for them to participate for whatever reason. But the ones that did engage with us were very invested in the campaign and really wanted to make sure that it was successful. So they were great partners for us to work with.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I know that I'm going to be following your work, Clancy and Terry. And Maria Dina, I have to say that I hope that retirement would give me an opportunity to sneak into some of your classrooms. I'm very eager to learn more. Troglodyte though I am, this seems like a very exciting future ahead. Thank you, all of you, for your innovative work and for your delightful presentation. I'm really appreciative. I assume that the rest of the audience is as well. And I urge people to remember to fill out your evaluation forms. I'll turn over the last minute or two to Diana for any housekeeping.
Thank you all for such a wonderful panel and discussion. And I know that I learned a lot from this. And just to reiterate Rima's last comment, we love to hear from you, and we love to hear your thoughts about this session. So fill out the session evaluations, and we also share those with the speaker, all your comments. So if you have any praises or anything you'd like to share with them, please type those in the session evaluations as well. Hope you enjoy the rest of today, and I will see you for the closing session. Thank you, everyone.